Hello, everyone. I hope you are all well. I'd like to welcome you all back to Foundations of Social Theory for our first online lecture. Our topic is feminist theory, and within this umbrella theoretical perspective, I will be talking about feminist standpoint theory and intersectionality. I've divided this lecture into several files to make it more manageable, so please make sure to listen to all the files. First, let me give you a working definition of feminist theory, which I have borrowed from the History of the Feminist Theory archive. This is so we could proceed with a common understanding of this theoretical perspective. So, what is feminist theory? Feminist theory is defined as an extension of feminism, which is a belief in equality of the sexes, into a theoretical, sociological, or philosophical discourse. It is a scholarly pursuit that aims to understand the nature of gender equality or inequality and covers fields like psychoanalysis, philosophy, anthropology, biology, literature, education, economics, and many other fields. Key areas of focus within feminist theory include discrimination and exclusion, objectification, power, and oppression, as well as gender roles. So, from that definition of feminist theory, we can go on to discuss feminist standpoint theory, which sought to develop an explicitly feminist theoretical and sociological perspective. So, what is standpoint theory? Standpoint theory is an explicitly political as well as social epistemology. Its founding principle is that those who are subject to structures of domination that systematically marginalize and oppress them may in fact be epistemically privileged in some crucial respects. They may know different things or know some things better than those who are comparatively privileged, socially, politically, by virtue of what they typically experience and how they understand their experience. Feminist standpoint theorists argue that gender is one dimension of social differentiation that may make such a difference epistemically. Their aim is both to understand how the systematic partiality of authoritative knowledge arises, specifically its androcentrism and sexism, and to account for the constructive contributions made by those working from marginal standpoints, especially feminist standpoints, in countering this partiality. Feminist standpoint theory has a Marxist provenance. In his historical materialist analysis of capitalism, Marx stressed that the realities of life in the new mode of production shaped the consciousness of the individuals experiencing it. In their book, The German Ideology, he and Engels wrote, "Life is not determined by consciousness, but consciousness by life." In the 1970s, some feminist socialist thinkers began to see the uses of Marxist standpoint theory for understanding forms of thought emerging from women's exploitation and oppression in a patriarchal sex, gender, order. The point of departure for standpoint analysis is a commitment to some form of what is called situated knowledge. This means that social location systematically shapes and limits what we know, including tacit experiential knowledge as well as explicit understanding, what we take knowledge to be, as well as specific epistemic content. What counts as a social location is structurally defined. What individuals experience and understand is shaped by their location in a hierarchically structured system of power relations, by the material conditions of their lives, by the relations of production and reproduction that structure their social interactions, and by the conceptual resources they have to represent and interpret these relations. One of the first to contribute to feminist standpoint theory was Dorothy Smith. She advocated an alternative sociology that begins in a knowledge community outside academic disciplines, in the experiences of those who have formerly been the objects of study. Dorothy Smith asked, where was the sociology in which women would talk back to power from the perspective of their everyday experience? She set out to make good the lack by creating a way of seeing from where we actually live into the powers, processes, and relations that organize and determine the everyday context of that seeing. Dorothy Smith saw parallels between the claims Marx makes for a knowledge based in the class whose labor produces the conditions of existence, indeed, the very existence of a ruling class, and the claims that can be made for a knowledge of society from the standpoint of women. Gurminder Bambra, herself a social theorist, explains that Dorothy Smith's paper, Women's Perspective as a Radical Critique of Sociology, was groundbreaking and inspirational to her contemporary feminist colleagues. Delivered at a conference in 1972, Smith showed how sociology was conceptualized as a male activity and that it depended upon certain conditions for its achievement that men, but not women, could take for granted. For example, women's domestic work routinely provided the conditions for men to live in the head world, their work lives unhampered by responsibility for managing their mundane daily needs for food, clean clothing, and a quiet, tidy workspace, and so on. In contrast, Smith pointed out that women's standpoint arose precisely from their bodily connection to knowing. According to Smith, men's ideas carried authority even though their understandings of social life and reality were distorted by their alienation from a firm grounding in the materiality of everyday life. These conceptual observations and analytic insights provided the impetus for Smith's work toward a different sociology for women. It was her conviction that the making of the worlds that people live in, the social organization of those experiences, had to be accounted for in research and knowledge production to make it useful to women's lives. For feminist standpoint theory, the issue of power is a fundamental concern. It is about challenging from the position of the marginal, silenced, and subjected the conceptual practices of power, the view, or what is known as the view from above. The subjects posited by standpoint theory are not a ragbag collection of individuals. Rather, they are groups sharing an experience of subjection to and by power, such as capitalist power, patriarchal power, white power, etc. They look at the systemic level from below, which is in opposition to the perspective coming from above. They find themselves in a positional consciousness that enables them to become a resistant, challenging collective subject. Although the view from the margins produces other kinds of knowledge that are valuable and often also more attractive to study, it is crucial for any emancipatory movement to understand the hegemonic center and the ways people situated there think and act. It is from this powerful position that most political decisions affecting the largest number of people in society come. And therefore, it is important to be able to counter these perspectives from the hegemonic center and the influence exercised by people who occupy this hegemonic center. It is also therefore important for those who occupy the marginalized periphery to be able to know what is happening in this center so that they can more properly engage and counteract the activities undertaken by those in power in order to more effectively provide countermeasures to inequality and social injustice. The next feminist theoretical perspective I will discuss is intersectionality. I'll focus particularly on the work of Patricia Hill Collins. The term intersectionality was coined by legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw. It refers to the multidimensionality of the lived experiences of marginalized people, especially Black women. Intersectionality is rooted in Black feminism and critical race theory. Within this perspective, Western feminists were criticized for marginalizing the experiences and concerns of migrant and or minority women. Take a look at the two posters. The one on the left focuses only on white women. It assumes a universal category of woman, represented by white women. The enemy here is patriarchy, and feminists in this perspective are concerned with gender inequality and oppression. In contrast, the poster on the right underscores that women's experiences are different and are shaped by color, religion, ethnicity, and other social categories. Their experiences are not only different by virtue of these individual categories, but also and more importantly, by how their experiences are shaped by the intersections of these multiple categories of their social location. Patricia Hill Collins, who served as the first African American president of the American Sociological Association, started writing about the multidimensionality of people's experiences even before the term intersectionality was coined. In fact, Patricia Hill Collins acknowledges that women from the Global South have been using this intersectional lens as an analytic tool without calling it as such as early as the 19th century. She cites in particular a modern Indian feminist born in 1831 who fought against a number of axes of social division such as caste, gender, religion, and class or economic disadvantage. Intersectionality, according to Gurminder Bambra, has become vitally important to much feminist work addressing issues of injustice and identity, particularly in terms of examining the multi-layered aspects of race, gender, sexuality, and class, but not limited to such expressions. Collins goes beyond additive models of oppression and emphasizes how debates on intersectionality have enabled a more complex understanding of the ways in which different oppressions intersect and work together in producing injustice. More importantly, she argues for the necessity of thinking about how these intersecting oppressions are actually organized through what she calls the matrix of domination. Collins argues that it enables us to go beyond binary oppositions. It also allows us to examine various domains of power, such as structural, disciplinary, and cultural domains of power, as they appear and reappear across different manifestations of oppression. For Collins, it is necessary that we understand and address the ways in which different oppressions interact. More importantly, however, Collins underscores the importance of analyzing intersectionality, according to Hill Collins and her co-author Surma Bilge, is a way of understanding and analyzing the complexity in the world, in people, and in human experiences. The events and conditions of social and political life and the self can seldom be understood as shaped by one factor. They are generally shaped by many factors in diverse and mutually influencing ways. When it comes to social inequality, people's lives and the organization of power in a given society are better understood as being shaped not by a single axis of social division, be it race, gender, or class, but by many axes that work together and influence each other. The discussion of the various domains of power in the previous slide makes it easier for us to see how using intersectionality as an analytic tool can foster a better understanding of growing global inequality. Economic inequality does not fall equally on everyone. Rather than seeing people as a homogeneous, undifferentiated mass, intersectionality provides a framework for explaining how social divisions of race, gender, age, and citizenship status, among others, position people differently in the world, especially in relation to global social inequality. Let us start thinking intersectionally by reflecting on the COVID-19 pandemic that we are all going through currently. Which people do you think have suffered or are suffering the most from the pandemic and the lockdowns that were implemented in the UK and elsewhere in the world? Why do you think did these people suffer more than others? To summarize this short lecture on intersectionality, let me leave you with these two statements. First, intersectionality focuses on the overlapping of categories of discrimination, and this is from Crenshaw 1994. Second, it provides analytical tools for framing social justice issues in such a way as to expose how social exclusion or privilege occurs differently in various social positions, and it does this by focusing on the intersection of multiple systems of oppression. If you would like to consolidate your understanding of intersectionality, please take some time to watch a short video which is on YouTube, and the link is on the slide here. I'd like to end this lecture on feminist theory with three questions that I want you to think about carefully and which we will answer in the seminars. The first is, do you agree that women's particular position in society, which vitally shapes their experiences, provides a critical standpoint through which we could better understand the social world? Second, how useful is intersectionality in underscoring A, differences and inequalities in society, and B, differences and inequalities even among women? Third, how relevant is feminist theory to the present time?